Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. So I know that people are extraordinary. And in fact, that's why I started this podcast, because I believe we all have incredible stories to tell. Well, today's guests take this to another level. As leadership coaches and corporate trainers, they have helped hundreds, if not more, executives live better lives. And, but it's their own story of near-death experience that gives them a special perspective on finding your purpose and your why. And we like to talk about that a lot on this program. Like, we're going to talk about that and so much more. But for now, I want you guys to welcome, please, Lou Everett and Sherri McManus, who, by the way, are the first couple or the first dual guest I've ever had on the show.
All right. So, that's a pleasure. So it's going to be honor. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's going to be a crazy journey here because normally I'm looking at one person. Here I'm looking at two, and I think it's going to be more fun probably than usual. I always have fun on these things, but I'm really looking forward to this, guys. And look, Lou and Sherri have this great business, Lou Everett Group. They're coaching and consulting in the Raleigh-Durham area and beyond now because of the web, of course, just taking on clients all over the place. But they've developed their own proprietary method for coaching and leadership training and coaching, and killer storytellers. I'm telegraphing a little too much, maybe building up a little bit too much, but I know that we're not going to be disappointed. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
No, thank you for having us, Dan. We're excited. We always love talking about this.
Yeah. Love your platform. Love the guests that you've had. I think it's an amazing, and it's a really unique time because, with the pandemic, I know it can be, a negative thing, but man, there's so many positive things came out of it. Mm-hmm. And for example, your podcast came out of it, and also our connection on LinkedIn. Yeah. So we've met some amazing people just through connecting.
Yeah.
And it's been a very fortunate journey. And of course, a lot of it is because of this last year has just caused so many of us to be more introspective, to consider what matters in life. In my case, it was, of course, continuing my work and my job and just trying to figure out more ways to, get my voice out there in some ways, but also to explore my own creativity, because I figured that we're all put here to create something, right? Mm-hmm. We're all creativity or creation is our manifest destiny, or it's our imperative as people.
Right.
And, it's in this last year really that I've come to grips with that a little bit more, and I'm still doing that, but finding your why, what you're here for. And that's really where you guys are kind of really pros, I think. And based on our previous conversations, especially, I want to hear more about that. So why don't we start there a little bit? And there's this story about, near-death experiences that I think is a horrifying but good way to kick off this conversation.
Right.
So why don't we start there and see where it goes?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll start that, and then I'll give my version because he saw it on the outside, and I was living it. But yeah, on August 13th of 2018, I found myself in the ICU in the burn center for 10 days. And at that time, we weren't sure if I was going to live or die. And while I got there, leading up to that, I just started out as a simple cold, right? And no big deal. Well, it kept progressing in the wrong direction. And then it became pneumonia, and they thought it was the flu. And it was just one thing was leading to another. And come to find out, this was not the flu. This was something that was a rare disease that anybody can get. But it was a disease where it was attacking all my good mucous membranes. So all my mucous membranes were revolting. It was being attacked, and I was burning from the inside out.
So it was like the same kind of damage that you would get from fire.
Burns. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And that's why they moved her to the burn center, because it literally was, but it was going the opposite direction. It was burning her from the inside out.
Oh my.
And representing itself that way.
Right. God. So from the outside, you couldn't tell.
No, I mean, you could tell something was really, you could tell that's when the manifestation began.
Oh.
It was like the zombie apocalypse. She was diagnosed with pneumonia for a minute. And then one morning she wakes me up, and at that point we thought she was on the mend, but it was getting worse. And she said something was wrong. And I looked at her, and all her lips were completely charred and burned and bloody. And her whites of her eyes were bright red. Oh. And it was something that you really I've ever only seen in movies. But thank God that the doctors knew what was happening when we brought her to the ER and got her to the right place.
And my throat even had blisters, I guess you could say,
burns blisters,
up to down to my throat. So it was closing up, and I was just couldn't swallow. I mean, even just swallowing water was like drinking.
It was burning. It's like drinking gasoline.
Well, no, it's just like swallowing glass.
It was
just
there you go.
It's a picture your worst sore throat ever when it's scratchy and you have some type of like gargling. But even that was just too painful. But you didn't know until you actually did a deeper dive. And I'm like, oh, that's why it's hurting, because there's actually like blisters and burns so any little thing was aggravating it.
What a horrifying and odd thing to happen. I mean, obviously extremely rare. And by the way, our listeners here are not getting video. It's just audio, right? So we're just, I'm on video with you guys. And for the record, there's no black lips and no red eyes happening on video. Sherri is she looks like she's completely recovered from this whole mishap. But and I'm so glad to see that. And clearly it's shaped a lot of what's happened since then for you.
Right.
But it must have been horrifying, Lou. And I mean, you guys, young married couple trying to get through all this stuff. I mean, I can imagine having a corporate job and, trying to build a business at the same time. And all of a sudden this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So how did that accelerate things? What was the whole reaction, and how did it lead to the Lou Everett Group?
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, basically, once I found the power and the gumption and resilience, really, I pushed through and I got out of there in 10 days. The doctors thought I was going to be in there for maybe 30 more, 30 plus days, or even death.
Without possibility of even coming out at all, man.
Right.
What was the treatment? Is there a medicine for this? Is there?
Well, there's a lot of medicines. And this particular disease is called MERM. It's like a derivative of Stevens-Johnson syndrome. They have to treat the symptoms and eliminate each symptom at a time in order for the body to begin to heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
And not every hospital knows this either.
Right.
But, so we're very fortunate to here in Raleigh, Chapel Hill area, the UNC.
Chapel Hill.
It's like Dr. House episode. I had 6 or 8 doctors around, and they had to do the diet. It was a whole team. So it was very interesting. And as much as that it's rare, it's not rare. Mm-hmm. Because the reason why we share this story is because leading up to this is that I was in a high stressful, high sales type of work environment, which that wasn't really the issue. But it was a very crash and burn type of situation where leadership at that time was more focused on the bottom line than they were valuing their employees anymore. And it didn't start out that way. It slowly eroded to the point where on expectations of working 70 plus hours a week, and also verbal abuse. And nobody needs to take that.
No.
And I take accountability for working as hard and long as I did. And being that rock star, I take full accountability on just that person. But like I said, with the unattainable threats and the verbal abuse just to keep your job and wondering if what's going to happen, your body is at that constant wearing yourself out and not giving your time to rest was just devastating. Yeah. And unfortunately, my body was like, well, now you're stopping.
Yeah.
And it manifested to that.
Yeah. Anybody who says that the connection between stress and your physical condition is kind of all mind over matter is just, it's nonsense. There's really some serious things that happen.
Yes.
I've had a situation, not myself, but, my wife's going to forgive me for saying this, but she better. Definitely, I wouldn't compare it, to what Sherri went through here. But there was a period of time where high stress in the job that she was in, mostly because she was being forced to fire people, a lot of people, and face to face in this kind of high pressure environment, and couldn't do the rest of her work. And eventually you start to do this more and more. And the connections, if you're a person who values human connections, and it's like you really are kind of feeling like you're eating away, your humanity's eating away. And eventually what happened to her was not just that, but she actually literally started to eat away at herself.
Sure.
And rapid, difficulties with digestion, rapid weight loss, and just had to get out, had to kind of take stock and say, this is not for me. Yeah. So it happens, and sometimes that's what it takes to find your why. But you seriously, nobody deserves that. And you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, saying you take full accountability for being the rock star,
Right.
that should never lead to this. Like there should never be a connection.
No.
Right.
And see, and it wasn't even, it's not just, us saying that it was the stress that caused it. It was the toxicity that caused it. It was the doctors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They said they were quizzing me while she was going through her situation because she wasn't in any shape to be able to answer questions. I had to help through that process. And they were asking me, what does she do for work? Where does she work? And all these things. And I already knew, of course, this environment that she was in.
Thankfully.
And I knew it. And so we, and they said, well, they all came to grips and said, this is what caused it. And so at that moment, we were like, why are we not giving people what we know so that we can save this from happening to other people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the more that we share the story, the more that people that feel comfortable in that safe space be like, oh my gosh, I went through something, or my body was starting to react a certain way, or I know somebody that is in this type of environment.
They're there now.
They're there now. Some people have gone to the hospitals and they've had mental breakdowns. Some people have caused ramifications in their family life. I mean, there's so many different levels. And for us being leaders that's a huge responsibility. And we have a platform and we have a passion. That's what really stemmed this, is to really turn that around and have the opportunity to really pin home the point of new leaders saying, listen, yes, I get it's about the bottom line. And I know everybody wants money at the end of the day. However, at what cost? And look what you're doing to the people that you're making that happen. Right. And I couldn't deal with that anymore. I had my own team at the time. And I was just like, I am not doing this to my team. I was more putting out tears and fires every day because they were so upset and trying to get them to do what they needed to do because of the leadership at that time. And I even went back into the fire, so to speak, even after trying to recover. I still got minimal damages because of it. But heck, I'll take that any day from being blind or dead right now. So I'll take it. Yeah. But I did go back to the fire and think,
for a minute,
for a couple months, to make a difference.
And that was it.
And
that was it.
And it made a dent to some degree, which was good because I wanted to make a change. It made some helpfulness.
There was slight awareness there with those leaders, but the awareness doesn't last.
It didn't last.
And it's the residual effects are just crazy. Sherri to this day, and will always forever the rest of her life have residual impact physically from that experience. She has a chronic cough occasionally because of it. She's chronic dry eye. She has to take medication for that. So, there's a residual effect on terrible leadership that can impact people for the rest of their life, whether it's physical or not. And that's kind of where we are. That's where we come from. It's like, okay, well, how can we not only eliminate something like this from happening, but why even get close? Right. Let's try to eliminate let's try to, instead of, because as a leader, you're an example. So if you set an example, you create a legacy. Okay. How do you do that instead of the opposite?
Yeah.
Instead of looking at, that's really where we come from here. That's our approach because, we were hit right in the head here. We were literally like, why are you guys not doing what you're good at and using that to really change and transform leaders? So there we are.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've seen the worst of the worst and experienced the worst of the worst. So it gives you a unique, I think, authority on kind of understanding how leadership can go down the wrong road and drive people to physical distress, insanity, or even at the best case, light unhappiness and depression. I mean, you seem to have had really the worst case scenario in many ways, but there's always obviously worse things happen to different people.
Right.
But that is something you took to heart, and the ultimate lemonade from lemons here. I mean, you created a business out of this, or a methodology based in coaching expertise and in learning. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
So you've got the Lou Everett Group. You are leadership coaches and trainers drawn from this experience. Let's see how we can draw back to that experience whenever you can. But what is it that you are solving for? And tell us a little bit about your coaching and your method and the things that you do. And we can divert and dig in wherever we so see fit.
The one thing too, just want to make sure I make this clear, is I've made a lot of terrible mistakes as a leader throughout my life, as I've learned. and become equipped and went through my training. So I want to make sure everyone understands, because you've made these mistakes as a leader doesn't mean that there's no way to relearn.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, right? Is relearning, is really understanding what it is to be a leader. The word leader, and just like the word coach, right? It's thrown around and it's like, okay, well, what makes this leader different than this leader? Well, the problem is we misconstrued words.
Mm-hmm.
We just put labels on things and expect, because you're in a position, you're a leader. Well, see, there's the problem. I remember when I was one of my very first quote unquote leadership roles. I was, 18. I thought I was a big shot, got promoted. I was working for a music store, got promoted to a manager. Of course, we call them managers, right? Which is still a very common word, managing. Now I'm looking back, like, well, the big question I should have asked is, what am I managing? All right. Because that's different than leading. There's a whole different situation there. And we can talk about that as well if you need to, if you'd like to. But taking the mistakes that I've learned over the years and that Sherri has learned over the years, and here the reality of it is, Dan, when you become a leader, okay, no one says to you, oh, hey, welcome as a leader. Here's the manual. I want you to take and study that. It's going to tell you everything you need to know to be a leader, and you'll be great at it. There is no leadership playbook. We have people say they have these playbooks, right? They have these.
There's one from the 1950s or so that needs to be burned and destroyed,
right? And even that one really is not really written. We just have to look at the experience. And the challenge is that people aren't automatically saying, but before we promote this person to a leader, first of all, why are we promoting them in that position to begin with? Well, you want me to tell you the number one reason why we promote people to become a leader?
Hit me.
Because they perform. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason. High performer. Yeah. I have a friend of mine from back in Pennsylvania who's a farmer, man, amazing farmer. I'm not a farmer. I can't go out and farm land. He's great at farming. Am I going to just pop him in a position to be a leader because he's a great farmer? He might be a terrible leader, and I wouldn't. I know him. He'd be a terrible leader, and he would admit it today. Okay? Mm-hmm. So the fact of the matter is, just because someone's a high performer doesn't mean they're going to be a great leader. But if you think they have potential, what are you going to do with that? I mean, are you going to train them? Are you going to put them through programs? Are you going to get them a coach to make sure that what you're putting them in is going to be successful for them and for the company? Or are you going to put them in that role as a trial by fire situation, which happens most of the time? Yep. And then 6 months later, you're sitting them down in front of HR saying, you know what, you haven't performed. Mm-hmm. We don't need you anymore. Sayonara. Yep. Which happens all the time. Yep. Because we haven't equipped them.
Exactly.
It's like providing someone the bow and not the arrow and say, hey, go out and hunt. Figure it out yourself.
Do you think a part of it is also this culture that we have where high performers are sort of told or encouraged, or they're almost kind of in this, they're in a belief system that mm-hmm. tells them that, okay, it's not enough to be a high performer. If I'm going to really succeed, I have to lead people. Right. So there's this kind of, mysterious thing. I got to be a leader. I have to lead. I have to be a manager. I'm just an employee. And this whole hierarchical system that's out there, it just encourages this, false belief system, actually. But for some people who could be fantastic, tremendous leaders, maybe they're not great performers.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. But they can be great leaders. So, I mean, there's stories about, like, what's the famous story? Is like is it the Peter Principle situation? I forget what it is, but where in a lot of sales-driven organizations, you take the best sales leaders or the best sales performers, you elevate them to leaders, then suddenly the sales team performance goes down like a rock.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is exactly where you're going with this and what you're saying. So
that's exactly right. And I think that, and you're right with the mentalities, but see, the perspective is all skewed here. Mm. There's the problem. The whole structure of identifying who a leader is all skewed, because just as a salesperson, a salesperson, they're a leader at what they do. Right? Let me repeat that again. Mm-hmm. They're a leader at what they do, which means they're leading, which means that they're great at what they do. They're an expert at sales. Mm-hmm. But does that mean that they're an expert in leadership?
It's a misuse of the term, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a complete misuse of the term. Mm-hmm. Or it's a misunderstanding of the term.
Yeah, right? We just assume that because they're high performers, they meet all the metrics, they tick off all those boxes, mm-hmm. that we just assume that they are going to be in those leadership roles.
Right. They're going to be good at it.
Right. And I'm actually looking back at my career, early on my career with different jobs, That is the notion. That was the notion. That
happened to me. I was promoted a lot of times because of that too.
Because of hard metrics. And I did too. Luckily, I had some leadership skills. I mean, not enough as I wish I would go back and do more personal development, which I strongly encourage any new leader or even existing leader to do. But that was the way. And I was like, okay, I'll just follow that way.
Right.
And it got me far, but it only will get you so far. Right. And that's the thing.
We don't want to fall into a leader. You don't want to be accident. You want to be an accidental leader. It's like, oh, I'm actually good at this after you're already in the role. See, that's a terrible way to learn. At the detriment
of the people that are under you for the time period in which you're not doing well.
You got it right there.
I think that happens to some of us too. I mean, I remember early on in my career or in one of my careers, I was a coordinator for like these language programs around these universities in the Tokyo area. And my job was to go to these different universities and kowtow to the university leadership who are always like 60, 70, 80-year-old guys, always men, who had, their own particular opinion about how much chalk we should be using in the classrooms or whatever it was. And, we were sort of an outside party who was providing language classes. So we had to really basically beg, borrow, and steal for anything that we could get from them.
Sure.
But I was in that position, and I was only 26, 27 years old, which was ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm trying to manage, right? And I'm using scare quotes here. This group of teachers who were hired on 3-month periods of time. Most of them were, older than me actually by that point, but generally speaking, 20s and 30s, who were travelers, right? They didn't want to teach their whole life. They just wanted to travel to Japan and have a great time. And why not pay for it by teaching? So they had a different motivation, but they were wild spirits, like almost to the last person. They were just like free-spirited people. And here I am trying to impress my boss as a 26-year-old going, now it's my job to manage you. Why aren't you up to dress code?
I know where this is going, man. I get it. Yeah.
I've got a dress code to watch. I've got a dress code they got to deal with, which is like the biggest problem, apparently, right? Being on time, being not on time is another thing, or, making sure that they're following the curriculum step by step, whatever the many, many rules are. My job was to check against the rules. And that's leadership? I don't think so. Right? I didn't know so at the time.
Of course not.
It took a couple of years of horrifying experience that way, and many, many, many after work beers to understand, to kind of take those lessons and bring them inside, and it took a long time before I figured out a different way.
Yeah, you see, and that's what a terrible way to learn. And here's a question for you, Dan. If at that time in your career, if there was someone there that says, hey, listen, I want to move you into this role, but I also want to be your mentor and your coach along the way. So that way I can help you learn what really it's like to be an influential leader, and also try to help you through the times when you fail. Imagine if that was there for you. Somebody presented that to you because it was there. Somebody just didn't present it to you. Most of the time, the leaders that promote other leaders don't know themselves. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And they go by what they've experienced and what examples that they follow, and they feel that it works. Then there's the challenge, because they're not improving themselves first before they actually try to equip those that they want to move into those leadership roles. And that's what brings us right down to our method.
Yeah.
Our method, so helps.
Just like you said, really just kind of rang. First of all, of course, it rang true with me because it's true. But yeah, it's like you see that a lot in companies where people who are identified and then brought up to management or leadership are just like, just cut from a certain mold or a certain cloth, and like they're just handpicked ahead of time, identified for whatever reasons, and just kind of brought up without any particular guidance or coaching or anything. And absolutely, many cultures are changing this, of course. I feel fortunate, I think, now to be involved with the organization. That's absolutely a mentoring and coaching organization. But that's new, that's a new thing for me.
Right.
So but your methodology is really addresses this issue.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
When it comes down to being a leader, now there's different kinds of leaders, right? I mean, if we think back in history, we look at people that are technically leaders, but in reality, they were dictators, right? Because of how they led. And that really is we have to distinguish that separation, that difference. And it really boils down to starts and ends with you as the leader. We have our method that was our proprietary method that we've developed, we've created based on our my stupid failures over the years, our
Yeah.
mistakes, and then what we've learned from those and how we've been able to develop ourselves and what we had to do to, hey, wait, maybe I do need someone's help. And then you get coaches and you get people to assist you. You start reading and studying books, taking courses. And what we've done is together, we've have about 4.5 decades of experience in the leadership and training space. And so we've taken that experience based upon that and the methodologies that we've learned from our certifications and our trainings with, people like Tony Robbins and John Maxwell and Zig Ziglar and all those guys. And then putting it to practice, we've molded our method, and it's called the Empowerment Leadership System. And it starts with an M. So it's not empowerment, it's empowerment with an M. Leadership system.
And by the way, listeners, we will give the URL to the Lou Everett Group website. You can check all this stuff out later, but absolutely check this out. So the empowerment system.
Yeah, we'd love that. I'll end this part here with this is to kind of show you where this system starts and ends. The first letter M is our first principle. Every principle, it's 10 principles in our system. And each principle starts with that first letter of each one of that word. A principle starts with M. Principle starts with P, etc. So M is me. The first principle of the empowerment training leadership system is me. So it all starts and ends with us as a leader. If we don't develop ourselves and set the example ourselves and understand what our approach is and how people think about our approach and adjust that approach and become a more influential leader instead of a positional leader, so more of what I call personal leadership instead of a dictator. And we understand what that means and the impact it can have on people. Until we do that and be introspective and realize just because I'm at the top doesn't mean that I know everything. That you work on yourself, then that's gonna completely change the dynamics of your team and the people that you lead.
Totally.
That starts there. That's the little appetizer I give you with that system.
Empowerment.
Empowerment.
And I've written it down. I've counted. It is indeed 10 letters. So there are 10.
Yeah.
And we can go through them a little bit if you want. Whatever pops to mind, I will suggest people check out the website to learn all about that. And, it's interesting, though, that you're talking about leadership starting with me and with person from the individual. And you hear this all the time because there's a truth to it that you need to begin with a self-awareness and a mindfulness to actually get anything to achieve what you need to achieve as a leader, as an influencer. But we've alluded a little bit to, being a leader, a manager, an influencer. What would you say is the difference between being a leader and an influencer, or are they both the same thing? Or, how do those two things work together? Leadership and influence.
It's a very good question. and I'm going to answer it this way because I believe this is the only answer to this. We can expand on it. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. Now, what type of influence? That's the question. You can have negative influence, positive influence. So you can still be a quote unquote leader, but your influence is what's going to create the result. What's going to create the outcome. So influence and the word leader to me are synonymous in the true sense. There's all different, ways we can take a look at leader. A manager, that's just a title. A leader, that can be a title too. All right. I'm a COO, title. CEO, that's a title. I'm the managing director of XYZ, that's a title. Titles don't make you a leader. I've learned that in my lesson over the years. It's not the title that does it. It's how you influence other people that changes it. Think about this for a second. There are people in history, Martin Luther King Jr. We can just go on with people in history that have influenced to this day and created a legacy. They didn't have a position. Matter of fact, most of the time their position was looked down upon.
True.
And it's because of their example and it's because of their influence on other people that have created change.
And their actions.
Their actions. That's right. That's right. That's a good point.
Actions speak louder than words. We hear that. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it's certainly true. Because as a leader, your actions speak volumes. And if you're not part of your team, if you're not part with your other team and your people, then that speaks volumes. Why should they care?
Of course.
Or if you're not being part of a training, if you're not part of personal development, then why are you telling them to do that if you're not doing it?
It's interesting. It's like if anyone has ever lost a pet, if you have a dog or a cat and you've lost a pet, right? And it's like, when our big dog was younger, he opened a door, any slight movement of the door and he would bolt. And you know what it feels like. And your animal is, your pet is gone and you're disconnected, right? You're disconnected with that situation. You're at a distance. You know, unfortunately, when many leaders in a leadership role at the leadership level, C-suite level, even executive director level, get to that level, that's exactly what your frontline people feel. If you don't use your influence on purpose, they feel lost.
Yeah.
You're lost because there's not that direct connection.
Yeah.
There's not a way. Do you mind if I tell you a true story?
Please. I hope they're all true, but go ahead.
They all are true. Instead of a hypothetical, this has really happened.
Yeah. Cool. Please.
So last year was a very challenging year for everybody, right? I mean, heck, before the COVID scare, we had racial wars and we had murders of people because of the color of their skin.
Yep.
And so all of this stuff happened. And there's a company, a local company, big company that I have connections with. It's a school for adult education, specifically in technology. And the CEO was quiet during all of this, didn't hear a word. Matter of fact, no words from the C-suite level at all. And students started sending emails and communication requests. Why are you not saying anything? What is your view on all this that's happening? Specifically on the racial issues that we still have, but that existed last year.
And for anybody listening, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for anybody listening, we're talking about the George Floyd situation here in the U.S. and all the ensuing, strife, societal issues that happened over the summer of 2020.
Exactly.
And you're describing a situation that unfortunately many CEOs, many leaders, quote unquote leaders, failed dramatically.
Many.
To do anything. So I'm sorry, please continue.
Thank you for that clarification for listeners just joining and everything. And it's not just this one leader, this company that did it. It just happened. It happened globally. And but with this particular situation, finally under the pressure and under duress, the CEO sends out a mass email to employees and to the students saying, "I don't really know why you want to hear from me, but," and proceeds to go on with his email. And the rest of his email was okay. But, people first say, well, why would I not want the leader of this organization that I'm connected with to express what they feel is the situation or their presentation of it? And you see, there's a problem there when leaders do not use their influence in a way that's going to benefit other people.
Well, empathize.
And empathy, and just I find that, and obviously it's very challenging. And that's just one story. We heard stories. I've heard over the last year, there's so many stories of people reaching out to us and say, "I don't mind the company. It's just they're not saying nothing." And it's not easy as a leader. That's our burden. That's our responsibility. You chose the role.
Yeah. And I think what you're pointing to here is something that just has popped up, certainly in my experience and over the last year and things I've seen as well. And even among some of the podcast guests I've had, where like leadership influence has to be by example and by action, as you've said. It also has to be in the pursuance of service, right? So leadership by service is the thing that I keep hearing now. Like, where was service leadership or servant leadership last year or 2 years ago? I never heard the term, but now I'm hearing it all the time. And I think this year has been an eye opener for that. Maybe it's because I'm exposed to different people now, but that's
highly possible.
Yeah. Like you guys, but the first thing that occurs to me is this whole servant leader idea. And the second thing is that leadership is, it happens in two ways. There's two, maybe two is maybe it's a mistake to call it black and white, but it's either like given through a position, like authority. It's leadership is delegated to somebody by an organization based on what we've already talked about. They're a great performer or whatever. They escalate or they elevate to a position of leadership. They have a title and suddenly people are responsible to them. Like there's that legacy of authority that's embedded in the role that everybody below them suddenly has to see them as a leader. But that's not leadership. That's just a place in the hierarchy that, according to rules, right? But the other kind is earned. And if you are not earning your spot as a leader, even if you're given the role or you go for the role and you get it, if you're not earning it through service, through example, through action, then and all of that is being accomplished by influence,
right?
Then you are certainly not in the right place, right? But it's not surprising to me that particular leader at that school failed in this way. But what happened after? Did he ever come around, or she? Did it ever go in a better direction? I hope they asked for your help.
No, they didn't. That was that email was the last communication.
Yeah, last communication.
First and last.
Gone.
Yeah.
So it's, and you make a valid point. It's that earning. Our leadership is earned. And I want to change it, understand it. And I want the listeners to understand too, is this. When we say leadership is influence, the influence is earned. It starts with that first. And then that leads to being a leader, because you need people to lead before you can be a leader. And how do you get people to lead is by that influence. Another analogy, if I may, is a compass. So those of us that know what a compass is, if you're really young listening, you may not necessarily know that. I know if I asked my kids what a compass was today, they would finally know, but they didn't know when they were. But a compass is, if you think about it, you got the little. Let's just take one you can buy at the store, or even on a ship or whatever. What is the purpose of the compass?
Find your direction.
Find your direction, right? So what makes up the compass is you've got the compass, and in the center point, you've got a center point where this arm sits on. And that arm moves based upon where you are on the equator, based on magnetic force, right? And it kind of determines where you are based on that. And as you move, that moves to kind of show you what direction you're heading into. But I'm going to take it from a different perspective. I'm going to now compare influence like a compass. There are levels of leadership, and there's one level in particular that is the highest form of leadership, and then there's one that's the lowest form of leadership. You take the compass and you have you've got the northwest, north and south, and then you've got west and east, right? Those are the two main points there on a compass. Now, so starting at the center point from west to east, there's the middle, right? Now that is that is a pretty good form of leadership. Again, that's what I call peer leadership. That's peer leadership. We influence one another, people that we work with, people that are on our teams, we influence one another. And that is a really great form of leadership, because if you can influence people to do what you want them to do, not because they have to, but because they want to, they respect you, because they see you set the example, and they see that you perform at a high level and love people and want to serve them. That is a very high form of leadership, right? And you don't even have a title. Now, you go to the southern piece of that compass. So below the baseline there, below west and south and east, is the lowest form of leadership, and that's positional.
Yep.
That positional leadership, people follow you for what reason?
It's in the rules.
It's in the rules.
Yep.
They have to. But the minute that they leave that office and they clock out, they don't want nothing to do with you, and they won't even talk about you till the next day. As a leader, though, we want people to want to follow us. So then you've got the north, the last piece of this, the leading up. From the peer level, you're leading up. You're leading up to those that technically have higher positions than you. They might be directly overseeing you, supervising you, might be your leaders. But being able to lead up with influence and influence those people to look at you and do what you want them to do because they want to, not because they have to. That's the highest form of leadership right there.
No doubt.
That's the highest form of leadership. So if you notice in that whole hierarchy, position doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all about the leadership.
My biggest lesson in leadership so far, and they keep coming, right? They keep coming. The great thing about this is, as long as you are, it's not just for corporate people either, right? It's for everything. And we'll get to that in a second. I think there's something I want to talk to you guys about. But, in my experience and background, you're in positions where you have to, lead one way or another, whether you're the new person or the senior person, or you're in a place of positional leadership by declaration, and you still have to then earn your leadership role. I mean, I've joined a team before where I'm placed there at the top of the team. I haven't earned the trust. I haven't earned the credibility of the people who are now on my team. you have to get there. It's not like from day one. If it's a trusting organization, the culture is there, maybe they'll give you the benefit of the doubt from day one, but it's just the benefit of the doubt, which means you just got a couple of chances here, buddy, before you really make it work or don't, right?
Right.
But like I've had to learn mostly in some previous iterations of myself to lead where I have zero authority and get people to follow the direction that either I espouse, either it's my direction or it's direction that I'm trying to advocate for, and get them to do it because, like, just like you said, Lou, because they want to, right? Not because they have to.
Right.
Because frankly, they don't have to. These people could peel off, do their own thing, and I would fail. And that'd be my ass, but not anybody else's.
Right. That's right.
Because I would be a poor excuse for a project leader or for a group leader. So I've always been especially in the latter parts of my career, focused heavily on building networks of people, right? Good. Building networks of people within and without my organizations that I can count on, that can count on me, and that I can, I'll just do whatever they ask me to do sometimes because it's your integrity. If you do what you say you're going to do,
that's right.
That's 99% of the battle.
Right. That's the example.
So sometimes always you have to lead by example, but you got to earn it over time. And I love what you're saying about the looking at it as a compass. As it's a really nice image to keep in mind as you go through. But one thing you said is when people go home, they leave the office and they're like, that's the last time they ever want to think about you if you're a terrible leader or if you're just positional and not earning anything. It's not only that, they'll not only will they go home, they may not come back, or they'll go home or find another home, another company for another boss to lead.
Yep, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah,
that's exactly what happens.
But you guys also talk about leadership, not just in the company, but like in the community. And that's another large part of what you do. So I want to give you the opportunity, if you can, talk about like how you work with people in the community to help them lead better, what that means.
Yeah, it starts definitely with the community, with the network, as you were saying. I think that's that's something that we have learned, and I have learned through personal development that, we need people. And I learned early on that, my leadership style, because I was from the positional style, I was like, okay, well, that's what needs to happen. But then realized that mentality because they didn't want to, because they had to. And that's not a good feeling, when you look back at that. And it's funny because one of our mentors, he wrote this, and I read one of his books, but it talking about leadership and what we're doing about non-positional and everything. Well, think about the titles. And here's a good example. Volunteer for a non-for-profit. Talk about titles. Now, granted, there are some titles just to be a title because that's the structure. However, if you look at a non-for-profit, talk about earning. Talk about earning, your leadership there. Yeah. And I, for one, I do on a weekly, to get back to the community I just enjoy it, is a local food pantry here in the Fuquay area. It's emergency food pantry. I've done it for over a year now. I've been thoroughly enjoying it. I love with the food. Everybody loves food. Everybody needs food. I just always has been drawn to that. And
I love food.
Yeah. And we take care of over 400 families now weekly, if not more. And, yes, there's some positionals, who's the point people, but honestly, you just have to earn it.
Yeah.
And then if you switch it to an organization, there's that crazy hierarchy, and then it goes back to that. So I'm like, well, wait a minute here, right? So that it's all about earning. But going back to the community, we also are part with a network that we partnered here with a wonderful gentleman. I'm going to call him out, Ed. Ed Dudley. He's awesome. Yeah. He's very well known here in the Raleigh area, and he has created this community of Connect Ed. Hence, Ed.
It's spelled out Connect Ed. Yeah,
catchy.
It's a community-based organization, nonprofit, but networking style. So then we bring people together in a networking style format that are truly want to help the community in some way. And we
bring speakers,
and things that come in, and we invite people to come in and share connect with one another on that level. And we have an amazing sponsor of our Raleigh chapter is a place at the table here in Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
And that is their focus is to feed those that don't have the money to eat. You can eat there for free.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sponsor it. So that's one of the things we do to help other people and lead in that direction. Mm-hmm. Another one we've just recently started that we're going to be starting in February is called Change Your World.
Mm-hmm.
And Change Your World, and we're creating a transformation tables is what we're calling this, of leaders who want to transform leadership. Because I mean, let's be real. I mean, especially from last year, it was so obvious that we are at a leadership deficit.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, John Maxwell calls it leadership sad.
Yeah.
We're all leadership sad, aren't we? And so the Change Your World transformation table, they only get 6 to 8 people at this table of leaders who want to begin transforming, but they start with themselves. So it's a table of us understanding the values that are necessary for us to change and continue to transform as leaders so that we can then transform the community and then hopefully the state and then the country and then the world as we grow as a leader. That's really the true impact. So plus we're always available for anyone in our network just to talk and,
and we should be a resource.
Be a resource
with individuals that that may need something. If we don't know, I know somebody that does. So we're very easy to. Yeah.
Well, it's all down to like what you're describing to me sounds like service, right?
It is.
It sounds like when we're talking about leadership, probably anybody who's an aspiring leader, who's a current leader, who wants to lead more in their community or take that and kind of bring it back into their organization, into their family, wherever they're going, it starts with service, right? Maybe it starts with me under that self-awareness, but that service part of it is so critical. And what you're doing in the community sounds like a lot like that. It sounds like you're helping each other out. You're for others first before you're there for you.
So we like to do. We try really hard to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, same with people. When you're managing people and you're leading people, I mean, if you approach it like they're people, it's unfortunate that sometimes some leaders will look at their people, and I really feel this way. That sometimes they look at a person and all they see is a number on their forehead. And here I was, at one point in my career, I was in a position where, I had a small group of people and it was kind of I was moved into this position and all new people came in underneath me and there was about 5 or 6. And they knew me a little bit, but they didn't know me, And so we as I got together, one of the first things I did, and I've learned this lesson the hard way over the years, and so I was never going to make that mistake again, is the first thing I did immediately, as soon as I could, as soon as everybody knew, I contacted them, talked to them over the phone, found out about them, found out about their family, what do they want, just kind of understand who they are. Then I met with them face to face, and I said, let me ask you a question. Now, what they've put me in is I'm your supervisor, but I don't want you to see me as your supervisor. But I want you to tell me, how do you like to be supervised and why? And now I'm finding out about the person. A leader needs to approach the person, not the position. And when you can approach, and that's all service. Again, the service just carries over into that realm. You're going to find results. People will stick with you. Even after you're out of that role or out of that company, people will stick with you because the residual influence you have on them.
It's so true. And that becomes clearer and clearer the longer that you are in the tooth, so to speak. So I've had now a couple of decades of marketing communications experience. I've managed quite a few people, not like massive teams, but I have a few people who've come in and out through my team or who I've worked with closely, who I've either partnered with or was in some sort of a leadership style relationship with here and there. And, you're so right. When you understand them as a person and when you aim to kind of support what they want to achieve, as long as you all kind of are moving to the same goal and are agreed on that.
True.
Because obviously if you're not agreed on the same goal and you're working for a company, then somebody's got to go.
That's right.
There's a problem. Yeah. But generally speaking, you figure out that you're aligned on your goals. Got to be aligned in your values too. That's another whole conversation that we got to have at some point.
Yes.
But that service that you offer them is the same as they're serving you too in your company. That has to go all the way around. You have certain things that have to be accomplished. They have things that they really would need for their improvement and their development. Sometimes they don't know what that is. And maybe that's what another thing a good leader does is helps to identify what those things are and helps that person understand what those things are.
That's right. From their perspective.
That sounds like a coaching thing to me, doesn't it?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And, and the reality of it is, Dan, is that the bottom line is important. As a leader, you're in a role and like you get pressure for the bottom line, right? Yeah. And no matter what your pressure is coming from the top, the challenge is, okay, how can you be the solid leader, regardless of what example you currently have to follow, right? Because you've got people there. We have to worry about the bottom line. Like I said, as a leader, we have to worry about the bottom line. That doesn't say that we have to sit there and trickle down the pressure on our people the exact same way. It's not their concern is the bottom line. Our concern is the bottom line. We took the role. Our concern is, how do I lead these people to accomplish the mission we have set before us and serve them at the same time?
Yeah.
And there's a way, and many ways, in which you can present that. The first way, as we've already talked about, is example. They will follow you if they believe in you that you will guide them in that direction and not trickle down, push them in that direction.
Yeah.
I don't like losing good players, Dan.
Nobody does.
And I will tell you, in my years, I've made mistakes and lost good players, and I suffered for it. And the reason I lost those good players is because I was terrible at leading. And so making those adjustments, making those pivots, none of us are perfect. I'm still not a perfect leader. We all have growing and learning to do.
Yeah.
We constantly, matter of fact, I've got books here. We've got one that just came in called Change Your World.
Yeah.
And it's not just the book, it's the action you got to put forth, right? We got the book, Change Your World. We'll say, you know what are we going to do with this? We're going to create a transformation table. You see, it's the action that creates the results, right?
I love the fact that you guys are constantly learning and constantly adding to your own knowledge and creating. And I love this whole idea of creation. We've talked about that before. Maybe not necessarily within this whole podcast episode, but we've talked about how we're all here to create something, I think. But the way that you guys are constantly adding to your knowledge, and now you have your own proprietary method of helping people to be better leaders. We didn't go through those steps, and that's cool because I think we just talk so much about leadership and our experiences, which is really where I was hoping that we would go, because you guys are fascinating people.
Thank you.
I love the way that you've overcome some serious adversity, and it's not the kind of adversity a lot of people think of, right?
Okay.
You hear these rags to riches stories, things like that. That's not what it is. It is, well, maybe it is in terms of well-being,
mindset,
right?
Mindset,
Yeah, mindset.
Clarity.
But it's, your story is a great story, and I'm glad that you're able to tell some of it here. We're winding down now, clearly, but before we do that, I just want to let everybody know you can find Sherri and Lou. It's Sherri McManus and Lou Everett. Don't let the last names fool you; they are married.
Yes,
find them at loueverettgroup.com, and you'll see in the episode notes the way it's spelled, but it's loueverettgroup.com, spelled exactly like it sounds. And of course, on LinkedIn, look for Lou Everett, look for Sherri McManus, connect with them. It's almost, it's a high recommendation, but obviously you have your own free will, but please do connect with Sherri and Lou when you get a chance. They're delightful people, but also really knowledgeable about leadership and about executive training. And of course, if you have business that needs this kind of help, please do call on them. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention, guys, before we say farewell? Anything that I've missed? Anything you want to put out there? Any other way to contact you?
Well, we can talk for another 2 hours, Dan, on this topic.
Well, let's give them an option that they can do. If you like the motivational, you like those quotes that come through. We actually have a
leadership motivational kind of quotes that we send out every
Tuesday. Free to subscribe. We don't do any type of salesy pitches or anything. It literally is just an opportunity to, something in your inbox that's just going to give that thought, that motivation, that maybe that's something that speaks to you, like, wow, and so we've created that. Feel free to subscribe.
It's called Tuesday Thoughts.
Tuesday Thoughts.
And it's right on our website, main page of the website. You can see it right there. You can subscribe. It's no cost to you. Just wanted to give something out there. So
As a subscriber, I can say it is excellent. Please do subscribe to Tuesday Thoughts. And that helped me to really, of course, prepare for talking to you guys. And also your Monday your Mindset Minutes.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, our mindset. Man, we love doing those things. I'm telling you, that's like the Tuesday Thoughts, the Mindset Minutes. Those are great too. I've got to actually add a little bit more to that, to the site, because I've got some episodes there, but we love doing the Mindset Minutes.
Yeah, so it's exactly what I'm looking at almost. Like, if you guys obviously can't see, but I'm staring here at Lou and Sherri together, and that's what they do. They sit together and they talk through these inspirational quotes, something or a concept or a thought about leadership or about personal development, and share wisdom about it, and something definitely worth your time. And look, on that note, this has been a tremendously beneficial way to spend my time. I hope it has been that way for you too.
Oh, it's been great, Dan. No,
I hope you guys liked it.
We have.
I can't wait to talk to you guys again. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you bet. Well, thank you, Dan, for having us. We love this, and we love your show. So keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.